good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I think that's from The Truman Show. I don't remember exactly how it goes. Anyways, hello. Thank you for listening and tuning into the podcast for the universe. Saturday, May 13th, which is this upcoming Saturday, because this episode came out on Monday. So if you're listening to it this week, it's going to be this Saturday, May 13th, 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. We are going to have the first live episode of the podcast. It's going to be your opportunity to tune in on Facebook and watch the podcast as it happens. It's going to be recorded at the Infinite Possibilities Higher Consciousness Festival, which is held up in Ogden, Utah. It's at the Ogden Amphitheater. It's going to be a wonderful opportunity for you guys, the listeners, the fans of the podcast, to tune in, watch the show as it happens, and also be able to interact and respond. At the end of the towards the end of the episode, we're going to do a Q&A session. So mark your calendars. Jump online and join us that day. If you happen to live in Utah and in the area, please come out and join us at the festival. It's a big 3-day event that's going on. We'll be there Saturday. You can find out all this information on our Facebook page. We've got the event page for the festival itself. So you can go and click there and find out about all the things that are going to be happening all weekend long. It's a beautiful event. Lots of psychics, readers, healers, vendors that have a slew of things for you, as well as performances and artists, and I mean, you name it, it's going to be happening this weekend. And then, as always, go to our website, energyislovepodcast.com. Made it really easy for you. Once you go to the website, there's a banner at the top. Click on that. It'll take you to the event page for the live episode. So we're looking forward to it. Hope to see everybody out. Hope to see everybody online enjoying the episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our wonderful sponsor, Entheozen. Go to entheozen.com. That's ENTHEOZEN.com. Entheozen. Entheozen is a nutritional supplement company that was founded in 2014 by Caitlin Thompson, a neurobiologist. All of the products that Entheozen provides and puts out are designed for promoting optimal brain health as well as your overall happiness. Some of the leading contributing factors to mood disorders and mental illness have to do with the nutritional deficiencies that your brain is lacking. So Entheozen can help and fill in some of those gaps. All of the ingredients that are used are scientifically studied and provide premium active forms of vitamins and minerals to ensure bioavailability as well as maximum absorption. One of the products that Entheozen provides is Transzen. It's a mood enhancement and can also be used as a meditation aid. So next time that you are going to meditate, next time you're going to sit in ceremony perhaps, or even just going to yoga, maybe hopping in a float tank, take a dose of Transzen and see how it can expand and help in those practices and take you to some of those higher levels that you need to go to in order to find peace and harmony and balance within your brain and within your body. So go to the website. Find out more information. You can also purchase their products directly through Amazon. If you just go to Amazon and type in Entheozen, it'll take you right to their products. And then when you're checking out, make sure you enter the promo code ENERGYIS. That's going to save you 10% on your purchase. You can either do that through their website or directly through Amazon. Go check them out. Remember, entheozen.com. This episode is also brought to you by DreamPod. Go to dream-pod.com and find out all about the best flotation tanks on the market. One of the neat things about DreamPod that kind of separates them from all the other manufacturers is they're constantly improving upon their tanks and coming out with new models and new designs, all tailored towards the client, trying to give them the best opportunity to serve their customers. If you're not familiar with floating, it's an amazing way to heal your body, heal your mind, as well as tap into some deeper spiritual aspects of who you are. Maybe you're looking to open up your own float center and bring floating to your community. Now that can happen in a much more streamlined, easy way. They ship directly here in the U.S. Contact DreamPod, and within the span of a week or two, have your tank at your location. Wonderful opportunity. Go check them out, dream-pod.com, and get in the tank and start floating. On today's episode, I got a chat with Nicole O'Brien. So I was really excited for this interview. I'm excited for all the interviews that I get to do, but this one I was especially excited for. Nicole O'Brien is the principal at Rose Park Elementary School. That's a local school here in the Salt Lake Valley in Utah. Nicole's been in education for over 16 years. And the reason I wanted to have her come on the podcast was what happened my wife found this story that the news did here locally in Salt Lake, and it was highlighting Nicole and the program that she's implemented at her school. The program is designed to help children learn how to identify their emotions, connect with their emotions, and then process and communicate those emotions in a much more profound way. It's an amazing program that she's done. It's called the Grump Meter, and it's a very, very simple technique and way of tapping in and connecting to where you're at emotionally. And the neat thing is, during the episode, we expand upon it, obviously, so you're going to learn all about it during the episode. But the realization of the fact that what she's doing with her student body there, what she's doing at the school with the teachers and with the students, really is something that we all need to be doing. It's going to give you techniques and ideas and ways to communicate better, not just within yourself, but also with the people around you and in your relationships and all sorts of different things. So Nicole did a great job on the podcast, not just sharing the message of what she's doing, but also we expanded upon a ton of different things. I mean, we even got into the ways that trauma kind of affects brain development and how she sees it play out at the school and how it affects kids and teachers and parents. And it was just amazing. So a lot of information in this episode. I know you're going to enjoy it. I know you're going to benefit from it. If you want to follow up with Nicole and reach out and contact her, we've got the easiest way to do that in the show notes. And I encourage you, if you are inspired by this and you want to whether learn more about it, maybe you're in education and you want to try to implement something similar at the school district or the individual school that you work at, please reach out and contact Nicole. She's going to be a great asset for you. But for now, sit back, turn it up, relax, drink your coffee. I put coconut oil in mine. Do the same. It's good. It's delicious. Enjoy this episode. And thank you so much, Nicole. Here we go.
You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is the Love podcast.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is Love podcast.
The podcast for the universe.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Well, good morning, Nicole.
Good morning, Craig.
It's wonderful to meet you.
It's really wonderful to meet you.
It's Nicole O'Brien, right?
Yes.
I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do the podcast. This is kind of it's definitely, you're the first guest that I've ever had kind of in the realm of education. Obviously, you're the principal of Rose Park Elementary. And so I'm excited that we get to chat about a lot of different things.
Me too. I'm really excited.
First off, how long have you been in education?
I've been in education. This is my 16th year. I started as a kindergarten teacher in the Salt Lake City School District in my early 30s. I started my career late. I was home with my kids and I taught kindergarten for 3 years, and then I was recruited to interview for an academic coaching position at the district level to be a math coach. So pretty green as a teacher, but I interviewed and was given the opportunity to be an academic math coach. So I did that for 7 years. That was really powerful experience because my focus was helping teachers with their instruction. And I was able to get into lots of different schools and see how things happened in, various public schools. Because when you teach in one school, it tends to be your only lens. So I'm really grateful for that experience and being able to see all the different teaching styles and how kids reacted to different teachers in different settings. And then one day I was driving home and decided it was time to get my administrative license. So I began that, and when I was halfway through that program, I was asked to be an intern assistant principal half-time. So I was able to finish my program and have a year and a half of being a half-time assistant principal at Benyon Elementary, ironically, back where I started. And then my first principal job was here, and this is my 6th year. And it was interesting because I was the math coach at Rose Park the year before I got hired to be the principal. And of all the schools I ever worked in, this was where I felt I belonged.
Yeah.
And when they called me and asked me to fill in as interim principal because they had transferred someone and it was too late to interview, so they gave me the year, I just thought all my dreams had come true because it was exactly where I wanted to be.
That's very, very
cool. It actually was really cool.
Would you say, because I think a lot of times, and it doesn't matter what area you choose to go into in your life as far as what you're going to do for your work, but would you say that this is something that you felt drawn to, that you were very passionate about, Or was it kind of one of those things you're like, I don't know, I'll try this. I'll give this a shot and see if it works?
No, it's what I was born to do. I tell kids here at the school that I did two things primarily when I was a young girl. I played school and I wrote and directed plays. And I feel like this is the perfect synthesis of both of those jobs. It's what I've always wanted to do. Although as a young girl, I have to say I was raised in a way and in a religion that didn't really create opportunity for me to think about what I wanted to do. And so I never thought about, my career. What do I really want to do? These were just things that were dear to my heart and things I could spend hours doing. And so, at a certain point in my life when I needed a job, luckily I had been to college for 4 years and I was able to go ahead and get a teaching certificate on top of that. But
Where'd you go to school?
I've gone to school a lot. I had a hard time kind of finding my way in education. So I started my first year out of high school at Weber State. It was Weber State College then. And I really just hated it. I wasn't ready to go to college. So after my first year, I took off about 8 months and I worked full time. Then I headed down to BYU, interestingly enough, where I went for a few years and graduated there. It took me a long time. I was 26 and 6 months pregnant with my second child before I finally got out because my, how would I call that? My vision of myself as a person with an education and a profession was non-existent. So when I graduated from college the first time, it was because you graduated from college. And that was what I needed to do to feel like in my family and my context, I had been successful.
Don't you think that's like so common though, especially like in your 20s where you do go to school or you go to college because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
But in no way, shape, or form do you have any idea what the heck you really want to do in life.
No, I didn't know. And like I said, I was a good student in high school, but I didn't really challenge myself. I was really into social things, which is interesting because I'm an introvert, totally an introvert. But that was what kept me engaged in high school, and I got good enough grades. But that whole mindset of what do I want to do with my life, it was decided for me kind of. I bought the story of, I'm going to get married and I'm going to have kids. And then one day when they're grown, I'll have a job. Mm-hmm. This was my story. And then at a certain point in my life, that story fell apart and I started from ground one. And I know I was I don't know that I'd call myself driven. It was just what I needed to do. And little by little by little, I found an academic identity. I refound my passions, for things that I had loved as a child and kind of set aside. And then the rest of it, not to sound woo-woo, but it really was a faith-based process.
You realize you're on the right podcast.
Yes, I am on the right podcast. And I know when I graduated, so then I'm jumping all over, but I went to the U to get my teaching license, and I needed to get a second bachelor's degree because mine wasn't sufficient for elementary education. So I had another 3 years of school, and shout out to my parents because I was divorced by then. I got divorced when I was 6 months pregnant with my daughter, my third child. And my parents made that happen. My dad, they were divorced by then, but my dad moved out of his house and my children and I moved into his home. He lived in an apartment and paid our bills so I could be a mom and go to school. So, that most people don't get that. And then when I graduated, I knew, even though I had no experience outside of my white heteronormative world, really very little, except a few years in my childhood when we lived in Hong Kong, but I knew I wanted to work in Title I schools. I just knew. And
we'll tell people what a Title I school is.
So a Title I school, and it's different from state to state and even district to district because Title I funds can be given to schools that have a certain percentage of students on free and reduced lunch. But districts get to decide where that cutoff is. So in the Salt Lake City School District, Title I schools typically, and I'm probably off by a few percentage points, but I think you have to be at least 75 to 80% free and reduced lunch to receive Title I funding, which is federal funding. And it is designed to give students with less access and students who might be at risk due to socioeconomic status more resources in public education. So our school currently has about 90% of our students on free and reduced lunch. So anyway, I was drawn to that because I did a lot of my student teaching and opportunities. And I just felt more connected to the kids. I mean, that was pretty much it. So I had actually interviewed for a job at a school on the east side, and I just thought, I don't fit here. They didn't offer it to me. But as I think back about it, I got my job 2.5 weeks before school started. And I probably should have been more nervous than I was that I didn't have a job, but I just knew I'd find the right place to be. Yeah. And that's been the story from here on out, even with being a principal. Because I had been interviewed a couple months earlier for the only other principal position that was open in the district, and it was an East Side school. And I made it to the final 2 candidates with the superintendent's interview. And at the conclusion of the interview, the assistant or associate superintendent said, "Now tell us why you're the best fit for, said school." And I said, "I'm not sure that I am the best fit for that school, And I said, I can do it. I will do it with my whole heart. But I don't know for sure that I am. And you'll have to decide that." And then I didn't get that job, and I ended up at this one. So
it's funny how it all works out, right? Like, I love it. It's a great story, the way that you tell it and all the different aspects of it. And the thing that I really like about it is the fact that, if you go back to that time period when you're in your 20s and you're having kids and you're trying to figure out what life's about and what you're doing, I mean, you really don't. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've yet to meet somebody that has everything squared away when they're 23, 24, 25 years old, except I think we're always supposed to, or we always think that we're supposed to, at every stage in life. Like, you graduate from high school and you're a teenager, and now you're going to go off to college, and you're supposed to figure out, and you're supposed to have everything squared away. And, people will tell you that you have to decide something that's going to affect the next 10, 15, 20 years of your life. And in the back of your mind, you're like, there's no way in hell I'm prepared to do that. But you kind of fumble your way through it. And I think the neat part about about your story and your life experience is that when you are finally find yourself kind of haphazardly in the place that you may not have necessarily thought that you would end up, but yet it feels so right, and everything falls into place conveniently, like you talked about. Like, do you know what I mean? The stars align perfectly.
They did, actually.
And then bam, now you get to do this, and you're where you're supposed to be, and you're helping the kids that you want to be able to help. And now we have a phone call. We're here at the school actually recording on a Saturday. But,
yes.
That's beautiful. Do you know what I mean? For me, that's what it's all about. And I think when people can go towards that, the hard thing is how do you recognize it, right? Like, you might have an idea of what you want to be doing in life, but to really be in the moment of, like, the universal spin of everything that aligns for your passion to unfold before you, it almost takes hindsight. It almost always is looking back to where you see it.
I believe so. Let me think how many years ago. Probably 10 years ago, I was introduced to a book called Presence. Otto Scharmer and 3 other people wrote this book, and it has been definitive for me in terms of really how my life has always been. And their premise is that you're leading and acting from a future that's trying to emerge rather than trying to create it all yourself. So, you observe, you pay attention, you use your head and your heart and your gut, and you look at what is out there trying to emerge, and then you're the facilitator of creating that. And the book is worth reading. It's amazing. But
it's called Presence.
Presence, yes. And like I said, there's 4 authors, and only one pops into my mind right now. But when I read that book, I went, yeah, that's been my life. It's been this balance of, well, it's not even a balance. As soon as I try to cognitively control everything and plan everything out, I'm instantly miserable. I mean, not like a day-to-day to-do list. I'm not talking about that, but
big stuff.
Yeah. Big stuff has to be the head, heart, gut, mind connection. I mean, that was probably more pieces of your body than you need, but for me, it has to be that way because I'm also kind of stubborn. And so if I don't have that experience, I feel forced, and then I become resentful, and I can't show up with my whole heart, which is the worst thing for me. If I can't really be present and authentic in what I'm doing, then I'm going to be miserable. And so is everyone else around me. And luckily, I've had opportunities to have those experiences, so I know what they feel like. It's a feeling. I know what they feel like.
You're such the perfect person for the podcast. Like, I love everything that you're saying because it's all stuff that we talk about all the time. It's stuff that I believe. What happened was my wife found the little thing that they did on KSL, highlighting the school and the program and you and everything that you have going on here. And she sends it to me, and she's like, you should look at this. And I watch it, and I'm like, yeah, I really like it. And we'll talk about it. We're sitting here talking about it, but we'll get into it. But that's the neat thing for me is you know what I mean, out there, something happens, and then I get to reach out and connect with somebody that is a complete stranger and throw out, hey, I have a podcast. You want to be on a podcast? And she's like, sure, I don't know what the heck a podcast is, but that sounds great. We'll try that.
No, I knew what a podcast is. I didn't know how they all worked. That's all. My kids they think I'm a little irrelevant. I'm not quite that irrelevant, but.
But it's neat. I mean, that's because you're sitting here talking about a lot of really, really big concepts and ideas in the space of passion and pursuit of what makes you happy and how to connect with that. And so I'm really happy right now.
Me too. And I want to tell you about this experience. So, we've been doing this work for years, for, the whole time I've been here. Mm-hmm. And every year it grows a little, and every year experience and new information inform the work and kind of guide us in the direction that we need to do. And a couple of things I love about our work is that we started way before the new wave of emotional self-regulation and awareness was in the news again. I mean, it's been in the last couple of years, you see it a lot. Mm-hmm. Meditation in schools, which we haven't quite gotten to that school-wide. There are a few teachers who practice it here and there, but I definitely would love to move toward that as an option. You really can't force people who don't buy into that philosophy to do that with their students. But anyway, I'm getting off track.
Well, tell me about let's start with the program. Okay. So then people know what the heck we're talking about.
So the story of the program, and I don't remember the exact dates or months even, but I have a friend, Christelle Estrada, who currently works at the State Office of Education. She had a friend, Janet Kaufman, it's not past tense, who at the time was a professor at the University of Utah in the English department, and she was teaching secondary teacher candidates for their methods program, for their degree. And I had just become the principal of Rose Park, and I don't remember, at some point in that first year, Janet and I were introduced through Christelle. And it was through conversations I'd had with Christelle about really the challenges of reaching kids who struggle in school. Whether that was demonstrated by antisocial behavior, I'll call it, and use that term in the opposite of pro-social behavior. So, behaviors that were not conducive to learning or the calm presence of being at school, or just really kids I felt like I couldn't reach. And the discipline policies at the time were, felt punitive to me. It was, if you're going to punch someone, I'm going to suspend you, and then you're going to come back, and it never seemed, it didn't do any teaching. It didn't, it just sent the message that you're not welcome here, and you should feel ashamed and go home, and then when I'm ready, you can come back. That's what it felt like. Yeah. And not everything was a suspension, but still I would sit across from these kids and I realized I had zero skill set. I mean, I have 3 of my own children, and that's been the best thing I've ever done, was have those children. And I think I'm a good mom. I'm not a perfect mom, but I'm a good mom. And so, but I still realized I was out of my league, right? And that our students didn't know how to talk about incidences or how they were feeling, or why were they under the table and didn't want to come out, and they didn't know. They couldn't tell you. I mean, some of them could say, I'm mad at so-and-so, but it wasn't helping me. So Christelle introduced me to Janet. Janet and her mother, who worked in residential treatment as a therapist for 30 years, had written this book called The Grump Meter. And Janet's mother, Lynn, had been using it in residential treatment with her students. And it's just the simple tool that you saw in KSL with the ladder-like 5 colors: calm blue, grumpy green, caution yellow, stop orange, and explode red, And they had been using it as a way to talk about how you were feeling. What color are you on the Grump Meter? And its original name was a tool for anger management, because in Lynn's residential treatment, that was the pervasive feeling. She worked with kids that wanted to commit suicide or were just really, really struggling, the most struggling youth. Yeah. And so anger was everywhere and all the time at every level. As we've kind of moved through the years, instead of it just being a tool for anger management, it's really a tool for emotional self-regulation and really awareness, because you can't regulate till you know what's going on with you. I mean, you can regulate, but you might do it in an unhealthy way, right? So we met and we decided to pilot pilot the program at the school. So we had a student council at that time, 2 kids from each class in grades 1st through 6th grade. So Janet and I spent the rest of the year just working with the kids in student council, seeing how the tool worked, just introducing it to the kids, doing a lot of artwork around it. Some of the activities we would do with the kids is we'd have them draw a body, and then they would outside the body, they would write their outside triggers. And then inside the body, they would write their inside feeling. So, somebody tripped me, I felt angry. Somebody didn't want to play with me at recess, that's a trigger, I got mad. And what's interesting about what I'm telling you is there were like 3 emotions that came out. So you'd have an outside trigger, and by and large, the kids were either sad, mad, or happy.
Isn't it? I think that is so, like, I think that's very, very indicative of society as a whole, where we are so limited in regards to the emotional spectrum.
Yes.
And we, everybody throughout time and history and the way that we're raised as children and the way society portrays and spins everything, we're really only limited to those very, very few. And there's so many, like the spectrum of emotion is so huge and wide and varied and so many different shades. Do you know what I mean? Where anger itself or frustration or something like that has varying kind of nuances to them and whatnot, but we don't ever dive into it. We don't ever work through it. So everybody stays in just these very, very, very common ones. And like you said, typically it's like, I'm sad, I'm mad, or I'm happy. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
And we saw this with the kids. You see it with adults. Mm-hmm. And now I'll segue into the patriarchy. I think the patriarchy teaches us that we get to have those 3 emotions because it's simple. We think it's simple. And even then we're not supposed to be too angry or too sad.
Yeah.
Because that makes people uncomfortable. And by people, I largely mean, when you're a kid, it makes your parents uncomfortable. So if you're too sad or too mad as a parent, I don't know what to do with that. I become afraid. Anger is a secondary emotion. So often that fear is manifest as anger or frustration. And so our kids get taught, particularly our boys, they get taught to have just those few emotions. And anger, mad, that's the primary emotion. And so we started to recognize or, see kids saying these things. So, of course, the Grump Meter already had included a more expansive vocabulary for emotions, but we started to work with our kids on that to give them more vocabulary. And hey, guess what? At recess, when someone was playing with your best friend, you weren't mad, you were jealous. And then because you were jealous, you felt afraid. And then because you were afraid, and the word is angry, you got angry and, you shoved that person down. So there's this whole trickle of emotions that we wanted our kids to understand.
That cause and effect
more.
kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
This happened to me on the outside, and eventually this is how it resonates inside.
And Janet even has exercises where you even pinpoint in your body where you feel those emotions. Is it my heart starts pounding? Is it that my tummy starts to hurt? Is it that my chest gets tight? Is my heart aching? Mm-hmm. So really, really aware of what's happening in your body. And then kind of the third component to that activity is, what can I do with that? If I'm mad or angry, what are some things I typically do, and what are some healthier ways to channel those emotions or manage those emotions? One thing that I've been and I hope I mentioned this in the KSL, I think I did, is that we're also taught to be ashamed of our emotions. For some reason, we're not supposed to have them. And if I have one message that I spend the rest of my life teaching kids is you don't need to be ashamed if you are sad or mad, and that hiding it just makes it worse, and that emotions are normal and natural.
Like the only one we're allowed to have is happy.
Happy.
Like unless everything's fine, then we don't want to hear about it. We need to keep it hidden. We need to shove it down, stuff it, cover it up with a happy smile, because that's the only one that we that's the only one that like society looks at and says, well, we can handle that. Mm-hmm. We know what to do with people that are happy. That's good.
And if you see someone who's angry, it's like, well, they need to get their shit together. What's wrong with you? You're angry. And yet we all get angry. I mean, if you don't get angry at something once a day, you're probably not a human being. It's just, anyway, so we can get to that. But so the year finished with Janet writing a grant to the Benyon Center at the University of Utah, and that grant was funded. And the purpose of the grant was to be able to do kind of expansive implementation of the Grump Meter at
So
Rose Park.
this was the year after kind of going
This
through
was my second year of school.
So you had that student council thing where you
we
initially
piloted,
rolled it
we
out.
tried, and during that student council year, we had a parent activity with the kids. We just kind of tried to see how it would go over, and it went over very well.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids were, I mean, they get it immediately. They get it, and they were able to talk about their feelings. In fact, I tell this story, there was a student who's since moved on, and I wouldn't mention his name even if I can remember it, but he was only here that year, and we had our student council meeting a few weeks after the Sandy Hook incident, and he was a first grader, and so his parents had not let him hear that in the news or see it or be exposed to the story at all. And we were drawing some version of the Grump Meter, doing artwork, some version of the Grump Meter. And he put, he did the 5 colors and then some kind of volcano thing coming out of the top red. And then above that, he put "you die." And I thought, and we were sharing, and I thought that was really interesting that a first grader intuited that, I mean, if your emotions get too big and you have no support and it gets too out of control, people can die. And it was just so ironic that situation had just happened, because the psychological profile of people who do those kinds of things, typically there's a lot of emotion that never gets dealt with, or addressed in a way. And so the person loses it. So I thought that was really interesting of him to kind of figure that out. I mean, kids kind of get it.
They always do.
They get it. They get it. So anyway, she wrote the grant. We got the grant funded. So in year 2, we had 7 teachers, myself and the counselor participating, and the grant allowed us to pay the teachers a stipend, which is nice because teachers are busy, they're overwhelmed. So it was a choice if you wanted to participate, but your time was also compensated. We had teachers all the way from kinder to 5th grade. Now we go to 6th grade at that time. The 6th grade, no one in 6th grade wanted to participate. So the second year was you had to introduce the Grump Meter to your kids and use it in your classroom on a daily basis in some way. We wanted some data, so teachers were challenged to figure out ways to get data on how it was working from day to day. We kind of left that open-ended. And then we wanted a writing component to it, so giving kids an opportunity to write. So the reason, a few minutes ago, we were talking about only wanting to be happy. So there's a story that ties to that. One of our 4th grade teachers who was participating, she had a journal, and the kids, and several of the teachers did this. They would have the kids check in when they first got to school, midday and afternoon. What color are you on in the Grump Meter and why? Just to kind of to train them to think about how they were feeling in every moment, that awareness piece.
And are they journaling about it?
They're journaling it. And the journal in 4th grade had a little less structure than the little kid journal. It had a little bit more structure, but essentially you would draw your color and then write out to the side. And she started to notice that every page of every kid, by and large, it was blue. Blue, 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 blue. But out to the side, they would write, "I didn't get any sleep last night, and I feel really sad." Or, "I didn't get a lot of sleep last night." And so...
And blue's the calm one.
Blue's the calm one, right?
When you're happy.
So we were in one of our monthly meetings, because we would have these monthly meetings, and she shared that. She said, "I started to notice that kids were all coloring in blue, even though what they would write out to the side wasn't always blue information." So she just called the class together, and she's said, everyone's coloring blue. And, through the process of conversations with the kids, it was because they didn't want anyone to know they were on any other color but blue. Oh my
gosh, it's so interesting,
isn't
it?
Isn't that a great story? It's like
And that's 4th graders, right?
4th graders.
So that's what, like 9, 10 years old?
Yep.
It's so funny how quickly kids learn things, right? How quickly they learn how to integrate into their families and into society and into what is accepted and normal so that they can be accepted. Like you said, they didn't want anybody to know that they weren't happy because of the stigma that may come attached with it and the shame that they would feel. And kind of, I mean, it's fascinating to see it on that level, right? Something so black and white, something so clear to see. And the implications of that are just so massive, I think. I mean, it's sad. It makes me sad in a sense, when you think about it.
Me too, but it facilitated a conversation that completely changed the norm in the classroom, because then she was able to address the shame piece. And why do we feel like, we don't want others to know? And the community in the classroom became stronger because she created an opportunity for them to take risks, to really say how they were feeling, and kept a safe environment so that no one was allowed to be, teased or made fun of or rejected because of an emotion they might be having. And she taught what is the ultimate probably goal of emotional self-awareness and regulation is for all of us to have empathy that others also are having experiences, and to try to get out of our own space at a certain point and say, what is someone else going through? And that's another piece we can talk about later, to see what we've done with the kids to actually, when they hear someone else's experience, what color they went to on the Grump Meter, why, and how they felt. Most, by and large, the kids start to develop empathy. Like, I didn't know that when I did that, it made you feel this way, and this is the color you went to on the Grump Meter. And so they start to get this sense that there's somebody else beside them. And it's interesting because I think most adults haven't figured that out yet. I mean, I work on that every day still, and I'm going to be 50 in 2 months or 3 months. And I definitely still work on remembering that someone else is having an experience too. And it's as valuable and legitimate as mine. So we did that for the second year. That was the year Peter Rosen did his first piece on the Grump Meter. And that was an interesting, coincidence as well, because the PR director of our district, he had contacted that person and said, do you know of anyone doing this work? And so Jason sent that out to everybody, and I quickly replied and said, we're trying. So he came and did the first story that year about the implementation of the Grump Meter in those classrooms and how we were using it, because my counselor was involved. So she's amazing, Robin Rain. She immediately started using it in her groups that she pulls in her presentations, and it became, the language that the 9 of us were using that year when we interacted with kids. We just kind of shifted to that. And every year since then, it's just become more normalized. It's part of our culture now. I think they say it takes like 5 to 8 years for something to become part of your culture. And if you think about that first year, this is year 5, and it's pretty much the norm here.
Is it pretty much widespread now throughout school?
It's pretty much widespread. And you'll find in different classrooms, some teachers don't use it like intentionally. Others use it a lot, some kind of somewhere in the middle. But we have the Grump Meters hanging all around the school. We, our school counselor, Robin, at the beginning of the year goes and does a presentation in every class about the Grump Meter, the tool, how they can use it. So at least every student has exposure to it. I use it when I meet with kids in the office. She uses it in her groups, or when she's debriefing with kids who are having issues. The teachers have started to use it. And going back to that first year with all the teachers, one of the big takeaways was the teachers. And I can remember the day that this same 4th grade teacher came to our meeting and said, I assumed that this was going to help my kids so much, and it has, but the person it's helped the most is me. And she said, I am able to say to my kids, oh, I'm at green on the Grump Meter right now. It's a little noisy for me. And the kids respected that. And rather than her projecting her emotions on them, confusing them, she owned her own feelings and why, which further, created a healthy relationship. Because I think we do that as adults, right? So we're grumpy or we're pissed or whatever we are, right? And the next person we get around, we're short with them, or we have a grumpy look on our face. And as human beings, we interpret that as someone's mad at me. And especially kids, especially our kids who have a lot of trauma and stress in their lives, because they do. The majority of our kids have quite a bit. So if they come to school and their teacher looks grumpy or is short with them, they automatically think my teacher is mad at me. Then they feel shame or worry or fear or whatever, right? And the day starts off pretty badly. And it's not the kids at all, but the teacher, in not taking responsibility for that, like, hey, I was up all night last night with a sick baby. I haven't had any sleep. I'm pretty tired. I'd rather be at home sleeping, but, I need to be here. So today I might need things a little quiet. Well, there's a teacher who took responsibility for how they were feeling. So the kids know that, if she isn't her usual smiley face, it's not something they did.
There's so much that I want to say because it's so amazing. the ability of using this technique, this small little simple thing of, the Grump Meter and the 5 colors and just a simple, like blue's calm, what's green again?
Grumpy.
And
then yellow is caution, because by yellow, you should be thinking, oh dear, I'm getting a little escalated.
Mm-hmm.
Orange, the way Janet and her mom have taught it and described it, is I better stop now, because what I don't want to do is explode. Because if I explode, if I get to red, I may hurt myself. I may hurt someone else. I may say or do something I would regret. I might break property, So the goal is to stop before you get to red, to use strategies, no matter where you recognize yourself at, whether I need to take a time out or take some deep breaths or go to the calming corner or whatever it is before I get to red.
The neat thing for me listening to you is you've taken something that is so incredibly difficult on one level, trying to not only recognize your own emotion, but then verbalize, communicate, effectively connect with somebody else to express that emotion. But you've taken that whole dynamic and that whole difficult thing that we suck at in society.
We do.
It's just something that people are miserable at when it comes to communicating emotion and connecting with emotion. And you've made it so simple and given these kids a skill set that they can start to use. And the cool thing is they're young still, right? Mm-hmm. So they're still impressionable. They're still having the opportunity to recognize and start that process of really connecting with their emotion. That's huge. I mean, it's just amazing. And then, like you said, the ramifications of teachers starting to see some of the benefits and them being able to come in and communicate effectively. Because you take a concept or an idea, I think as adults, we always get stuck in our heads and think that the things that we're experiencing are so important and kids will never understand. We have these difficult lives as adults and all these complicated, intricate things that we have to deal with. Lucky for kids, they don't have to worry about it. But it's not the case. And if we have the ability to break those things down and communicate them in such an easy way, shape, and form that the kids can recognize and then respond to. And like you said, she's coming in, she said, today I'm a little green and this is why. And the kids are like, oh, okay. And then they can recognize that. I mean,
plus it's great modeling. It's great modeling that, this person I respect and who's here for me every day also has feelings. And so that also creates a level of safety and trust for our kids, but through that modeling piece. So anyway,
how have you seen? So it's been rolled out now for about 5 years. You've been using it. It's pretty integrated into the school. How have you seen? Like, what are some of the big changes where prior to having this in place and now where you see? Like, you have kids, obviously, because you guys are
kinder through sixth.
Kinder through sixth. So you have kids that have been here along the whole journey and experience of implementing this. How have you seen some of the things that have been beneficial?
Okay, so first of all, we do have pretty high mobility in our school, but we do have a cadre of kids who've been here, since we started this. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking of a particular young man in the 5th grade who has, so before I tell this story, I just want to put these terms out there because it also informs the work. So along the way we did just in brief summary, we did the implementation of the Grump Meter, did a couple of years of that. And then I read a book that introduced me to the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which we can come back to, which helped me understand how trauma impacts brain development.
Oh, my goodness.
And that it does very significantly. And then from there, and a few other people in the building got introduced to it kind of at the same time. So from there, we started to look at our kids, I started to look at them differently. I read a book called Lost at School. The big takeaway for me is that kids who are acting out don't possess skills. They're not trying to drive you crazy or be naughty. They don't want to be. They just don't have the skills to communicate or get the things that they need. So all of this kind of came together for me a couple years in, and then we started to learn about trauma-informed practices. So this we'll talk about kind of the levels and the things we've done every year, but this particular young man has been here through all of this, and he has experienced and to some degree still continues to experience quite a bit of trauma in his home. And about trauma is things that happened 2 or 3 years ago, you can have a trigger and it puts you right back in that same space. So trauma doesn't just happen once and go away. And we don't really often know what someone's trigger is. So it can rear its ugly head at any time. So
and it's multiple things too.
It's multiple things.
Where it's not going to be one thing that sets it off, and it could even be something so significantly different than what you would typically think, but yet it's still going to trigger that response.
Exactly. So this kiddo, let's see, how would I describe him? In the beginning, escalated very quickly with any trigger. So went from blue to red instantaneously. And we see that a lot, that there are kids that don't have that middle area. They're on blue or green, and pretty soon they've punched somebody or they've tipped over their chair. And so that's been an interesting profile for us to work with, as the kids who don't steadily increase, they just blow up. So he was that kid. His triggers, he had a lot of triggers, including, being made fun of or being challenged to do something. And then if he couldn't beat the other person at it, whether it was a race or whatever, then he would become explosive. And sometimes just because of what he was experiencing at home, he just came to school off, very defiant, not wanting to do his work. But no matter what happened, he was unable to take accountability for his own actions. It was always the other person. And you would, be talking with him or debriefing with him, and he would say, well, so-and-so made me, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember specifically, but you could see on the camera him punch somebody, and he would say, I didn't do that. Somebody made me do that. And he's a likable, charming kid, of course. So keeping in mind that I'm changing over all these years and he's changing over all these years as we're, doing the skills. So as I've become less frustrated, more aware that if a student is up the Grump Meter, I'm not going to try to talk to them right now. That's a key thing. So with this particular student, if he was higher than green, one practice that I changed is you let me know when you're on green or blue and we'll talk, right? Because so many, and I'll use educators, but so many adults were like, we're going to talk about this right now.
I do it.
Yeah.
I do it with my kids.
Yeah. And they're up the Grump Meter.
Mm-hmm.
And really, you're not in your frontal lobe. I mean, let's go back to brain research on this. You're in fight or flight. You're going to have a productive conversation in fight or flight? No. Everything's a competition in fight or flight. So to be able to even say to this student, hey, when you are ready, let me know. Or conversely, sometimes he would do things that would send me up the Grump Meter. And so I would say, I can't talk to you right now. Uh-huh. And so when we are both on blue or green, we'll have a conversation, right? So some outcomes for him are he's recognized a lot of his triggers, and he's learned to manage some of those, or they're not triggers anymore. Because we've talked to so many things. It's why does that really bother you? Why if someone looks at you funny across the room, do we know for sure that person really is looking at you? Kind of some things that could reduce the number of triggers. And then the biggest change I've seen in him is he's able to say, now is not a good time for me to talk. He can put himself in a place to calm down. And then when we talk, he's now able to finally say, yeah, I did that. I did it. And this is why. And I know what I need to do to make it right. And that's a conversation. Now, part of it could be that he grew up, but I happen to believe that if he grew up without the guidance and the interventions and the ways that we've changed our practices, he would be an angry, volatile kid. And now he's just lovely. Now, does he still occasionally do some really random, maybe stupid things? Yes, he does. Recently, he decided he wanted his cousin to fight someone else. And so he was like trying to get this fight going. And by the way, his cousin's a girl. So he wanted her to fight this other girl. And we caught wind of it. And he came down to my office, and I looked at him with this look, and I go, dude, what? And he's like, I know. I did it. And he's like, but they didn't fight. And I said, nope. But, this is really, I'm not happy about this. Why would you want to do that? And we processed through it. He normally in that situation a couple of years ago, he would have gotten really mad at me and refused to talk to me. But we just continued this dialogue. And I said, I'm not really sure what consequence you're going to have, but I'm going to think about it. And so I went home, and over the weekend I thought about a consequence. That's the other thing, is sometimes you don't need to have a consequence right away as the principal and as an educator. Sometimes it's okay for us to step back and think, because if we act from reaction, we're going to do what's habit for us. And what's habit for us is how we talked about we were raised, punitive. Maybe we're going to say something that we regret. So I just said, I don't know. And it came to me over the weekend. So I called him down on Monday and I said, I know what your consequence is going to be, because we have been practicing more restorative type consequences. So if you'll look over there, you'll see our school values. And I said, you are going to make a PowerPoint for me, and we're going to share it with 2 classes about the value we care for each other. And I want you to describe what that means to you in your words, and then make slides of what that looks like and slides of what it doesn't look like. And then you can put a conclusion on it about why we should live that value. And he's finished it. It took him 6 recesses. He had to miss his recess to do it. I didn't break the law. They get 2 recesses a day. I just took one of them because it happened at lunch recess. So it seemed like a logical consequence that he would have to miss lunch recess. It took him 6 recesses. He has 6 slides. And now he's going to go share it with a 1st grade class and a 2nd grade class.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So that was that, and he had to apologize to his cousin and the girl. And so now we talked about why getting kids to fight each other is not demonstrating our value that we care for each other.
You talked about how, granted, he has grown up, right? He had, he's no longer a child in a sense. He's still a kid, but he's grown up over the time period. And I think that from the sounds of it, there's outside factors and things like that, but it's a huge reason why he's able to process and be, do you know what I mean, kind of a productive part of this school and come to school and maintain behavior and all that type of stuff. Because I think 99% of the time, kids that come from trauma, that live experiences at, in home or at their home, they stop evolving in a sense. They stop maturing. So yes, they're going to grow up, they're going to get bigger, they're going to go through puberty and all those things that happen. But like emotionally, they stay stuck at those spots.
Yes.
And he's been able to break past that. And undoubtedly, it's got to be because of these things that you're doing. I mean, I think that's just incredible.
Well, and the other piece that we've worked toward as a school, and we're pretty close to being where I would like to be. In fact, we have an amazing faculty and staff right now. It's been exciting to see some new people come in and be willing to see this as their family and their home. Is a message we want to send to our kids, is that you're our kids. This is your family. You belong here. And so he knows we have his back, and he knows that I might be frustrated with him one day, and he can see it in my face, but he also knows I'm not going to turn on him, that I will own that, and that I will always be there for him. And he knows that from his teacher, and he knows that from some other significant adults in the building. And I can tell you that the trauma in his home has not decreased in the last 5 years. So I can pretty confidently say that this has had a significant impact on him. Now, in this, I have to say this for all the listeners thinking that we're so perfect. We are not. And it was interesting because we have reduced our out of school suspensions, and that's intentionally. I would say confidently that our work with the Grump Meter and trauma-informed practices and recognizing ACEs has changed our practice and who we are. Therefore, our kids, truly their behaviors are less extreme than they used to be. So there's less need for suspension. But alongside of that, we decided to suspend less intentionally because it's an exclusionary practice. So do I suspend kids occasionally? Yep. But it's not from an angry, egocentric, punitive place. It's generally for the safety of another student, or that student. It has some logic behind it rather than just, oh, you got in a fight, you're suspended.
Yeah, just that blanket punitive
Just
thing.
a blanket punitive thing. And so one of the nasty comments on the KSL page was, well, you can reduce suspensions if you want to. And yeah, you can. I mean, you can, but we also don't have as much need in terms of old-fashioned, what you would consider need. We have replaced it with other ways. And so in addition to seeing reduced dramatic behaviors, we just also have changed the way we practice, and that's had a benefit on our kids.
So let's talk about, or let's attempt to try to talk about the space of trauma and how it affects children, because it's such a huge thing. I'll give you a little bit about myself. I used to be a police officer.
Interesting.
And so
we could talk about a lot.
Like these families that these kids come from, obviously were the families that I dealt with as a police officer. And, you deal with the person that I would interact and deal with on a regular basis as a police officer, because undoubtedly you deal with the same people over and over and over and over again. They're people that slowly over time I started to look at in a much different light than initially in the beginning, where they were just so emotionally disconnected and stunted in a sense in their emotional growth. And it all stemmed because of a life of trauma and experiences, and obviously dating all the way back into childhood. And so, you kind of get these kids right at the beginning of their life and their journey and their experiences, where because of their home life and because of what they're experiencing and seeing and literally just being in, right, just that energy and that environment that they're in day in and day out is affecting them so massively. So there's lots here that we can talk about and discuss. But when it comes to, what was this, the ACEs, is that what
ACEs, ACES, yeah, ACEs. So what that is, and I would encourage anyone who's listening to Google it, and I'll just do a very brief summary. And I don't even remember how many years ago it was, but Kaiser Permanente did a study on their patients that, and I apologize to Kaiser Permanente if I don't get this exactly right, but it was tens of thousands of their patients as adults. They asked them if they gave them a list of, I think it's 10 childhood traumas they may or may not have experienced. And they checked, and you get an ACE score, and they found, and keep in mind, these are people with insurance. So we're talking about people who technically have access, right? Which many of our families don't have access. So you can see that well, anyway, access is a big deal. We need to talk about that. But so these people, they found a direct correlation. If the patients had 3 or more childhood ACEs, and that means it happened before you were 18 years old, they had a higher rate of teen pregnancy, alcoholism, smoking, heart attack, high blood pressure, cancer, early death. I mean, you name it. There was a correlation for persons with ACE scores higher than 3. And the higher the ACE score, the higher the correlation. And so they started to look at this impact of trauma on families. And there's a book called How Children Succeed, which is where I first got introduced to it. There's a lot of information out there that really just talked about what you were talking about, that cycle of, if you're a person who had a high ACE score and you had a baby at 16, and then you're raising a child before you had access to any kind of help to address that, it just perpetuates itself. And one of the things that has come out of brain research is that trauma, toxic stress, changes your brain structure, especially during formative years, right? So they've shown pictures of healthy brains, relatively healthy brains, and brains of children and adults who experience toxic stress. And there are fewer and weaker synapses in your brain. So it changes your brain.
I think it also, even in utero, like
yes,
if your
yes.
mother is experiencing, massive amounts of trauma and things like that, and, in the process of when you're in utero, it's doing the same thing and having some of the same effects and ramifications on your brain as it's developing.
Yes.
As a,
Well, and there's even a book called It Didn't Start With You, that I haven't read the whole book, but one of my colleagues, Joel Arvizo, has. And the premise of that book, the research that they're doing, suggests that it can actually be 2 generations in utero. So if my grandmother was experiencing toxic stress, and as an adult, which I happen to know, a just very painful life, then that can affect her eggs, for lack of a better word. Which impact my mom, which can impact me. So it's, and never do I want to use that as a victim place for me, because I know better, right? It's like, I know better. It's an interesting piece of research to think about in terms of undoing the impact of trauma over many generations. It can, like you said, it can be from your mother.
It's fascinating.
Or your father even, right? Yes.
It's so fascinating to think about how the massive effect that has, right? In the realm of like spirituality and the New Age community and all that kind of stuff, we always, there's this whole thing about past lives or past experiences, or, because your great grandmother was this or that or the other, all this energy that gets stagnant and held and bagged up and carried over, and you're suffering for the experiences. And I believe in it, right? I sign off on it because I'm a crazy hippie, but at the same time, there's so many different parts and pieces of it. And that whole biological, chemical aspect of our DNA and how we're made up, and the correlation and connection. I mean, it's just fascinating, right?
It is. And just bringing it back to school and education, it's such an interesting educational environment right now. It's kind of chaotic, but, you could talk to any educator over the last many years. The profession has changed. In some ways, it's been good. In some ways, we're really addressing achievement gaps. It's a little extreme, I think, the amount of testing that we're doing and the emphasis or the value that's assigned to that testing. So I'm going to talk about that for a minute, because it's not as simple of a formula as you have great teaching, you get great results. I mean, that would be perfect. That'd be a perfect world. In some cases, that's the case, but there are other factors that play into it. And I'll give like an example. This is just me. I don't have any, well, there probably is research to support this, but we have an amazing group of teachers here at this school, who are doing their best, and they're doing an amazing job to teach the core curriculum, because that's their job, in engaging ways. And that's another whole conversation, because engaging students who, well, we could get into screen time and short attention spans and whatnot, but it's a challenge. They're doing a good job. They're using assessment to drive their instruction. They're identifying spots where kids didn't learn. They're going back and reteaching. I mean, they're doing all the things that on a checklist good teachers do. And the thing with one of the biggest impact sizes, the effect sizes on students, is the community that your teacher creates, the credibility that your teacher has as a person who's reliable and will show up for you and create a caring community. So in addition to all this academic stuff, we're also working on these classroom communities, which they're doing. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And for the first time, I really see this school-wide thing, like these are our kids, which is even better. But so we're still not going to have great test scores on the end of level. Now, we may have grown in certain areas. We've focused a lot on writing. We've focused a lot on reading informational text this year. We've done heavy pushing on that. So I'm anticipating that our end of level scores are going to go up. We're going to see some growth. But last year we were like 24% of our kids were proficient on our end of level tests, compared to, more East Side schools that are like 90% proficient. Are we going to close that gap? No. Are we going to be 80% proficient? No. Are we going to make growth? Am I proud of everyone's efforts? Yes. And let me tell you something that's impacted us greatly this year: immigration. So we're talking about families where maybe the parents are emotionally very healthy. In many cases, they are. They're loving parents, but they're impacted by immigration issues. So they are living daily in stress. We have kids coming to school in stress because they might go home and one of their parents isn't home. And so you look at that. If you are worried if your mom and dad are not going to be home, how present are you going to be in school every day? If you have the most wonderful teacher on the planet, and we have wonderful teachers who hug you every day and they're so glad you're here, and they know that you're in trauma, and so they don't take it personally if you're having a rough day, come on.
It's such an uphill
they can
battle.
Still learn a lot, but it's very different than someone who doesn't have that stress.
Well, I think that because there's so many different factors, right, when it comes to the education system and the struggles and the issues and the things that, we place upon our kids. And you're obviously going to be able to speak to it better and know better. But from my perspective, then the only perspective I have is obviously my schooling and the experience that I had. And then I have 4 kids and seeing them go throughout school and everything. It feels like, when it comes to the education system, if we look at, over the past 50 years, maybe, everywhere, technology and advancements and growth and change and evolution of things, where so many things are vastly different than they were 50 years ago. But I feel like the education system is slowly evolving in that process, where, granted, it's not the same that it was 50 years ago. We're not using blackboards anymore and all these type of things. So we've incorporated technology in a sense, but I think we're still trying to implement ways of teaching and connecting and systems put in place back in the day when things are so vastly different now, right? I mean, I'm such a different person. When I was a kid, life was so much different than it is for my kids today, and vice versa for me and my parents, and so on and so forth. And so I think that I just think that the curve, like that learning curve of education is here, and we need to get it to here, but we're not doing anything to fill that gap in.
I don't think it's being done enough. And that's just my my personal opinion is. I think we're seeing, I don't know. I'd have to go out and talk to everyone else. My sense is that this is gaining traction.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there was a time. I don't believe there was a time where we had it all figured out, because we haven't even begun to address institutional racism and its impact on our kids and schools. We haven't even gotten there, because that's still that's not gone away, right? So we can have great smart boards. We can have the greatest technology in the world, but if your structures have not changed, if your policies have not caught up, if educators aren't doing their work to look at their own biases, whether it's related to racism or students in poverty, there's an overwhelming body of research that says that kids will perform to the degree that their teachers believe they can perform. And again, I want to go back to saying, is that going to make the leap from 24% proficient to 90% proficient in a year or 10 years? Probably not. But is it going to make a difference for every individual student if the teacher has done his or her work to look at what might I be contributing that might cause my kids to not make as much growth as they could? Then you're going to see a totally different experience. And we have a lot of our teachers here that are taking that on, and it is hard work. And so I want to shout out to the teachers and staff that are undertaking that, because it's not easy to take a look at yourself and say, oh, I might have some things that are getting in the way. And I'll tell you so kind of backing up to our process. So we did Grump Meter. Then the next year we took a team to a conference where we learned about ACEs and trauma-informed practices. And we started to kind of sit with that for a little while. What did we need to shift in the way we thought we were thinking and how we were practicing at school, particularly when it came to, behaviors, student behaviors? How are we viewing those? What did we want to do as a school? And that was a really hard time. There were people that are like, nope, the way we have done it has always worked. I'm not changing. I don't want to do that. There were other people that are like, yeah, this is really scary and I'm willing to take a look. There were others who were just like, yeah, I'm in. And there's no judgment on anybody. Everybody has to, you have to do what works for you at the time. I'm always hopeful people will take a look, but it can be very scary. So then we did, not this school year, but the school year prior, we started really heavily focusing on restorative practices, at least at the administrative level. A few teachers, myself, our community school director, Hoel, we all started kind of shifting toward this in practice to see how it was going to work. And there was some resistance. There were people who didn't like it because it didn't look like so-and-so did this, they're out. Anyway, it created some tension.
Teachers and things like
teachers
that.
And parents. We had some parents that were not happy. And this was also the year we opened our wellness center, which is interesting. Because the idea is that we want our kids in school. We want our kids to be in class. And so we opened a wellness center as a way to provide support for students who might be struggling, and we could talk a little bit about that. But it was a really rough year last year to kind of, and I went kind of to the extreme defending the practices. I was not as patient with people as I should have been. It was tough, right? But we made it. I recognized things I could have done differently, like provide more for lack of a better word, professional development or access to information about why, a little bit more tolerance when people would feel frustrated. Because I was like, well, don't you see this? Don't you see it? It's so great. And anyway, whatever. So this year the Wellness Center has become, people have understood it. It's working for our kids. The data are showing that our kids are successful when they visit the Wellness Center, and I can tell you how we use it. But the next step was that almost all of our teachers, or whether they're classroom teachers or support staff, have calming corners in their spaces. So the idea went from kids going to the wellness center to calm down if they couldn't, to first trying the classroom, first trying their strategies like breathing or, stress ball or whatever. If that didn't work, then they can go spend time in the calming corner. And if they still weren't able to really come back and participate in class, then we have the wellness center. So that's been amazing because the wellness center is less busy. Like, it's still busy, but last year it was inundated. And now kids it's kind of cool to see what's
So
happening.
what do they do in the wellness center?
Okay, so the wellness center is a room that we dedicated. It's staffed with one of our para-educators. She's awesome, Teresa Benedict, under the direction of our counselor, Robin Rain. So those two rooms are close together. They have a door. They share a door between them. And the wellness center serves a couple of different purposes, which initially it took us a while to figure out. We were warned up front, you're going to open a wellness center and every kid's going to want to come because it has kinetic sand in it and it has art and, which we did see a lot of misuse of the wellness
just
center.
Coming into play and hang out and stuff, right?
Exactly. But luckily we were warned about that. So we knew to kind of watch for that and address it. It was a little bit of a bumpy period. But so now there's a couple of purposes. The first purpose is that through working with teachers and staff, we're able to identify kids who either are currently or over time have a lot of trauma, who struggle in class to learn, to stay focused, to keep on task. And those students have regularly scheduled visits to the wellness center. So the teacher works with the wellness center staff to find a time of day, 15 minutes, that's not hopefully during a primary instruction time, where that student goes down to the wellness center and just spends 15 minutes with Mrs. Benedict. And each student does something different. Some of them actually bring their classwork because the content is a trigger. Like we have a particular student who math is a trigger for her. So her time is always during math. So she gets 15 minutes of conversation and one-on-one math support. That isn't common, but if the content is the trigger, then we try to address it that way. Some other kids come and they just need someone to talk to. Other kids are working on specific skill development that the counselor is working with Teresa to, identify. We have a couple of kids who don't transition well. So they were coming to the wellness center and never wanted to leave. So the wellness center staff go to them in the classroom or they sit outside the door and they just check in with them every day around an individualized plan. The second way we use the wellness center is it's a space for kids who have sensitivity to loud noises or chaos. They eat lunch in there because the lunchroom is loud. And even though it's not necessarily chaotic, if that's your trigger, we have found a bunch of kids that the whole afternoon was thrown off, and it was easy to kind of see that the lunchroom was just too much noise, too much light, too much busyness. So a handful of kids from each grade eat in there. And then the third really use of the wellness center is if a student is really just struggling and they need a break. Those are unscheduled, obviously, and they can get their teacher's permission, go down to the wellness center, chill out, get back down to blue or at least green before they go back to class. And the goal of that is within 15 to 20 minutes. And usually that's okay. Sometimes they need a few extra minutes, and then the staff will call the teacher and say they're going to be here another 10 minutes. But that's pretty much how it's used.
What else are you guys, when I say what else are you guys doing, like you're not doing enough, you're doing a ton and it's amazing stuff. But what else are you thinking about? Like you talked about meditation and how some teachers are starting to kind of try to use it and incorporate it. Is that an area where you think that you guys, because we see that stuff all the time, like on Facebook, all those fun videos where you see, the schools in Switzerland or something like that, where the whole class is meditating and it's all beautiful and wonderful and great. And I'm a big proponent of meditation. I think it's a very important aspect to like connection within yourself. And I mean, it helps in all the areas that we're kind of talking about. But is that something that you guys want to try to start to incorporate and roll out in some sense? I've had several teachers say to me, can we work on mindfulness and meditation? And so the way we've set up for next year for professional development is we have 2 days before teachers' contract time start that we've allocated some money to pay them at their hourly rate. It's optional, can't force them to come. But one of those sessions during those 2 days, we're going to bring someone in that can talk about mindfulness and meditation. And it may not take with everybody. That's okay. But the point is that we can have someone who's a professional come in and talk about the benefits, practices, what it can look like in class. So that's one of the plans. And I anticipate that several of the teachers will give it a try next year, especially those who haven't already. The big quandary is if I practice meditation or if I take time to do this, I'm missing instructional time. And again, that goes back to the pressures of our academic reality right now, or our educational reality. And yet I believe fully, and so do the teachers who practice it, that if you take those few minutes to do it, you actually get way more out of your day.
So I'm hoping, I'm hoping that people will be willing to come, listen, think about if it's something they could or want to use in their classroom and give it a try. Another thing that that several of our teachers are doing, and I want to continue to support, is doing community circles daily or every couple of days, where you either start the day or end the day or both, sitting in a circle with your class, having a discussion around whatever, allowing kids to talk and discuss, with the purpose of this safe environment where you can talk about something that's either stressful or fun, but you're building the community. It's a great way to address concerns in the classroom too. Like if there's been something that's going on, you pull the class together and they take turns talking and use I statements. And so that's something I want to continue to work on. And then something I'm just so excited about, the context isn't exciting, but the possibilities is our staffing. We were cut by a teacher because our enrollment's down a little bit, which means that next year we'll have an extra room. And so I'm going to build an adult wellness center in that room. Well, and I'm going to tell you, because one of the things we did last August during that professional development time was work with Dr. Uma Dorn from the University of Utah about compassion fatigue. And it's huge. And it's huge in the education profession. In any service profession, compassion fatigue is huge. And it's been really ignored. It's like, oh, you're fine. Keep working those 10-hour days and giving your heart and soul all day long, and you're going to be fine. And the reality is we get tired. And when you experience compassion fatigue, you tend to kind of shut down. And it was a really interesting response from the faculty and staff. It's like, yes, thank you for validating our experience. And she was very straightforward. It's like, you have to have boundaries. You have to, like, in other words, you need to make yourself go home at a certain time from work. You need to focus on yourself or do things you enjoy so that you don't experience compassion fatigue. And if you do, this is what it looks like. And at least recognize you're there and go ahead and, do what you need to do to heal yourself from that, because otherwise it impacts everybody. So I thought we'd just pilot an adult wellness center.
I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah. And I'm going to buy a water feature and find someone to donate some comfortable chairs, and we'll put a refrigerator in there with apples and juice and water bottles, and that we'll have all lamps, no horrible fluorescent lighting. And teachers don't get a lot of free time. In my perfect world, we'd have a staff member that could just go around and relieve teachers for 15 minutes a day that was highly qualified, so they could all just take a time to breathe, but they can maybe eat their lunch there, or if they don't have recess duty, go down there. It's just something I kind of want to toy around with. So we're really addressing everyone's wellness.
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think where my head was, because as you're talking, I have all these questions that come into my, pop up. That's a great idea. I think you're going to see benefits from it.
I think so too, actually.
This is one of the things. So, and I want to get your take on it. I'm just going to share with you my thoughts. I think that I don't hate the education system in the United States. I think it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. I think it's incredibly flawed and all that kind of stuff. But I think as a whole, not even in the U.S. or in the Western part of the, society or whatever the case may be, I think worldwide we have to shift and change how we view education and what its purpose is. And I think in lieu of going to school to be taught reading, writing, all the type of typical things that kids go to school to learn, I think they go to school to learn how to deal with emotion, how to communicate, how to connect, how to tap in. And that's the main focus of what you go to school for. And then secondary, so like now it's like the secondary things that kids get, right? It's, physical education and music and art and things like that. That would then become what is now the primary focus of education, where secondary, or I'm rambling, but the main focus of education is you send kids to school to learn how to be productive, happy people in the realm of the world that it exists, right? So it's about everything that you're doing here. And more, like, so art is now taught as a main subject and all these type of different things. And then secondary, oh yeah, we better teach them how to read and write and do their math. And I think the effects of that would take place over the course of like one generation, right? If we have parents that were taught that way, then we're going to obviously see that they're going to teach their kids that way. So we start to shift and change that cycle from a negative place where parents and people and trauma and all the things that exist who are so disconnected and have the inability to impart that onto their children, now are connected to it and have the ability to teach it. And so now, do you know what I mean? I mean, the compounding effects of that could take place. But granted, that is in like the ideal, perfect world where we could, flip it on a dime and everything would be great. But I think the things that you're doing here and the things that you're trying to not only implement, but I think it's amazing that you're just giving it a shot. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Throwing it out there and seeing if we can make it work. Have you had, like, what is it like as far as like resistance in regards to the things that you want to try and do, not just with individual teachers, but like on a district level? Like, do you ever come into where like you don't necessarily get to do what you want to do, or?
We've been really fortunate to be able to do these things and implement these things. I can't say. My perception at the beginning was that I was the odd one, and there were a few people that were like, yeah, I get this. And now this year, our district has actually, our student services department is actually going out to schools and doing professional development around ACEs and trauma-informed practices. And I think they even started last year. And restorative justice practices in schools. It's caught on. I mean, which makes me happy,
Yeah.
Because again, like at the very beginning, I'd say the Grump Meter and people are like, what are you talking about? So yeah, I don't know. That's just my perception though, just because I didn't know of anyone else in our district actively doing the work. I can't say there weren't others. I wasn't aware of anyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting working in public education. You are kind of isolated. I mean, it's no one's fault. It's just you're here every day working, finding time to really collaborate with people and find out what they're doing. It's hard because there's so much to do here. And again, back to that whole idea of wellness and self-care, at a certain point, you have to be like, I got to go home now and take a bath and, read a book and go to bed. That would be like, if you asked me my pie in the sky dream for Rose Park Elementary or any school, here it is. I would love to see the school day extended, but teachers paid. I would love another hour of the day in school. But again, that would be reflected in teachers' pay fairly, another hour at their hourly rate. I would love, because there's so much to fit in a day. And, you mentioned that reading and writing are as important. I mean, or these other things are as important in reading and writing. And I agree. I know that, how do I want to say this? Back to access, back to equity, back to the gap in, particularly between students of color and Caucasian students, it's still huge. It's too big. And where we're wanting to do all of this human development, I'll call it, just practicing humanity and kindness and modeling that. And, I'm rambling, but basically I would love to see another hour in the day so that there was sufficient time to teach reading, and not just teach reading, but teach it in a way where kids love to read. Like reading is what they can't wait to do. And maybe not every kid. There's always kids that aren't going to want to do that. But so it's not so technical. I mean, I have some amazing teachers that are teaching kids to love to read. And you should see the difference, when it's shifted from that technical practice to something that connects to their, what are we talking about? Feelings and their emotions.
Yeah.
That's when you learn to love to read, is when you're touched by something. But if you don't have basic reading skills, you can't read the content that makes you a reader. So yeah, extra hour in the day, which would then, it would be like, oh, there's 15 minutes to do meditation. There's 30 minutes to do my community circle because I have time to do what I need to do. So I'd love to see that happen. I would love to see summer school redone. So we've been recently, I have been, and people in the district have been, and we're moving toward it. This person named John Hattie did a meta-analysis of thousands and thousands of research articles in education to determine which practices have the highest effect sizes. And shockingly, summer school has a very low effect size in terms of for all the resources we put into it. So I'd love to completely redo summer school. I would love to be able to afford to have staff and interested faculty here during the summer to kind of do what kids want to do. Go on field trips, spend time talking, processing, writing about those things, doing
maybe that's the time where they get all the emotional and all the other things, and can tap in and connect to all that other stuff.
And we had one year where we got a grant from, I want to say it was, I don't want to give I'm not going to say because I can't remember who it was. I don't want to give it the credit to the wrong person, but we got a $25,000 grant, and we used the money to do a 2 week STEM academy. It was the coolest thing we've ever done. We were able to afford to hire certified teachers to plan the academy. We were able to hire enough paraeducators that the student to teacher ratio was like 1 to 8. It was 10 days of this camp, STEM camp or whatever we called it. I think it was a STEM academy. And 9 of the 10 days were field trips. And we I didn't go on a lot of them. I went on some of them. They went to Antelope Island. We went day camping. They went to Microsoft and did coding. They did, I go on and on and on. And we were 9 days out in the world, learning about what's happening, developing vocabulary. Because let's face it, when you have experiences like that, your background knowledge and your vocabulary grow, right? You know more about more things. You can get excited about what's out there in the world. It was the coolest thing. We did design thinking one day at Avery, or at what's the bird place called? Aviary. Yeah. It was fabulous. That's what I would love to do. And, it's probably, they would be exhausted if we did that every day, but I would love to have Let's Love Learning Summer Camp and have the resources to do that. Because people try. It's true. They try to do enrichment and whatnot, but it's really not funded in a way to do it. And during that time, you would build those relationships. You would have conversations with significant adults in the building and build those relationships, teachers across grade levels, so that you knew someone in every corner of the building was an adult who knew you. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Well, I think in the grand big picture and scheme of things, and it's no different, like we talk about this all the time, like how are we going to change the world? How are you going to impact and change, massive, massive things, right? It's really easy for people in the spiritual community to think that they can just sit and meditate and stay in their happy place and put out good vibes. And then slowly over time, that's going to, bring upon world peace. And I think over time it probably would, but that's hundreds and thousands of years that we'd all just have to sit and be happy about things. And I think
that's going to happen.
I think at the end of the day, it's individuals doing things in their own little parts of the world, in their own little ways that they can affect. Because you have a massive effect, even though it may seem like you're just here at the school and you're only affecting your students and all these type of things, right? But then it's always that compounding thing where these kids, like the kid that you talked about that's in 5th grade now, that's kind of been through this process since you guys have rolled it out, undoubtedly he's going to move through life differently. And he's going to, do you know what I mean? You never know the rippling effects that just this simple thing that you've implemented, and it's not simple, it's massive, is going to have effect. And that's the stuff that I think is massively important for change on the big scale, like on the big, big level. And so kudos to you. Like, I think it's amazing.
Everybody. It's a team effort, you know? Yeah.
But at the end of the day too, like you're the principal, right? You're the one that kind of has to spearhead it in a sense. It's not going to be, and granted, there's plenty of schools out there, and I'm sure there's teachers out there that are trying to do what they can, and undoubtedly they're the ones bringing forth these ideas and trying to get their administration on board and everything like that. But to have you, the person kind of in charge in a sense, be the one that's kind of starting it and driving it. And yes, you need help, and yes, you've got that, and teachers are on board with it and everything. But I think it's amazing. And where was I going? I had something I was going to say. Oh, what would be your advice, whether it be to parents out there that are listening, or teachers that are listening, or anybody that's listening out there in the world, because we have listeners all over the place, if they wanted to try this or try something similar to it, or what is the best avenue or route in regards to kind of, and I know it's hard because every school district's different and every school is different and policies are different and things like that, but where can people start?
With themselves. No, so maybe this is not going to be a linear answer. Okay. So if I am speaking to parents, I want to say, your child or your children is the most important thing you will ever do. They like becoming not everyone's cut out to be a parent. So, but if you are a parent, not everybody wants to, so this isn't meant to say like, if you don't have kids, you're not doing your calling. No, everyone needs to do what works for them. But if you have brought a child into the world, or 2 or 3, that's your most important work. And if there's something getting in the way of you connecting to that child on a regular basis, and if you are feeling frustrated or resentment or not the kind of love you want to feel for your child, there is something you can do. And that something is recognize that. Admit if you don't have skills. Admit if there's something that's not working in your home. And be brave. Be brave. And start with saying, and I guess this would be for a teacher too, but I want our parents to understand that they're so valuable. And I think sometimes they don't think they are. If you regularly butt heads with one of your kids, probably of the 2 of you, it's going to be you that needs to start the change, because you've had more life experience. Ask yourself what's going on. Now, not to take it back to the Grump Meter, but I'm going to. Why is that triggering you? Chances are it has something to do with your youth or past. What's a different way you can think about that? Do you need to engage with your kid in that moment? And I'm going to tell a story with that. So the first story that we did with Peter, we had also done some parent nights. And with interested parents, we were able to get a couple families, maybe like 8 families, to come 3 Saturdays and just kind of work on this process. And one of the parents who participated, he has a couple challenging kids. And the one student, his younger student, I did suspend because he had been pretty severely, extremely physically aggressive for a couple days in his class and had hurt a student. And there was there was a need for the classroom to settle down and heal. And so I had him go home for a few days. It was like at the end of a week. It's like, we need to rebuild. The teacher was a little frazzled. And the parent shared the story that how the information changed him. He said, I was so angry and thought my kid should know better and blah, blah, blah. And he felt like a failure as a parent, because we do that, right? We are like, I failed.
Immediately, yeah.
I failed. And so he said, I made a different decision. He said, I told my son that we're not going to talk till we're both on blue. And it took like 36 hours. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but a solid day.
Yeah.
Okay. Not talk about it, not talk about what happened. Mm-hmm. And that was the parent making a different decision. And so when they were able to talk, they both cried. He said, I love you so much. I was so sad. What's going on? Tell me about you. And they had this like connecting experience over it instead of a severing experience. And, I don't know the outcome of that. But the point is he did something different. And instead of sending the message to his son that he's broken, that he should be ashamed, he sent the message that I'm here for you. And we can talk about your actions. Those weren't the best actions, but I care about why you got to that point, and I'm going to show up for you. And so I think it takes courage. It takes courage to look at ourselves daily. It's not like a once in a lifetime thing, and want more and be willing to use such a, for lack of a better word, silly little tool, if that's what it takes, to start a discussion. And the nice thing about the Grump Meter is it's so easy. All you have to do is say, Craig, what color are you on right now? Oh, yellow. Do you want to talk about it? Nope. Want to talk about it later? Sure. That's easy. I don't need to go, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
We can communicate in a really simple, non-threatening way.
It helps. Like, I'm sitting here thinking about how that's not just applicable, student, teacher, parent, student, or not parent, student, parent, child, spouses. Like,
yeah.
The ability to even communicate more effectively with my wife, and having that realization, and, just a simple thing of like, where are you at right now?
Yeah.
And then verbalizing that, and then the recognition of like, okay, we're probably going to wait a little bit before we talk about whatever's going on. Because
we don't want to hurt each other. We don't. All we have, let's go back to the spiritual realm. All we have is each other. That's all we have. And there's so much need for love and kindness. And we get in the way of that ourselves.
Yeah.
And we have a way to move out of our own way. And I don't think the work ever ends. I'll die working on it, but I'm going to work on it. And so, when I think about saying to educators, you have these kids 7 hours a day. Why not make it the most amazing experience you can possibly make it? Why not have joy and kindness every day? And people are going to be like, it's been a long time since you taught. No, I get it. There are days that are just hell. Yeah. They're just a shit show. I get it. I mean, there are days that you're just like, I'm putting on Bill Nye the Science Guy because nothing is working. I get that. I understand that. But, I can just think of so many classrooms in this school where they're like families, and that just makes me want to cry. That's so awesome. Healthy families, because there are families that aren't so healthy.
Yeah.
But every kid knows their teacher, and their classmates are going to have their back. And you know what? When one of their classmates doesn't, the teacher stops and says, we need to address this as a class. One of our friends is hurting. And I don't know, that sounds pretty idealistic, but it is a good thing. And then the other, again, you're going to talk about the research is I'm going to take it back to that. It's you learn when your frontal lobe is actively engaged, and your frontal lobe is able to be engaged when you're on blue on the Grump meter and possibly a little bit of green, and otherwise it's not. And so if you're talking about the ability to have friends or kindness or learn anything, we need to look at it from that angle. And I know it's back to the kind of the beginning of the conversation when we were working with the student council. One of the questions we asked them is, why would you be on blue? Like, what's even the point of being on blue? And these little kids, they're still up through 5th grade, because I have friends when I'm on blue, because people want to be around me when I'm on blue, because I feel peaceful when I'm on blue, because I can learn when I'm on blue, because I smile when I'm on blue. Like they understand that these other spaces, while they're our reality, we're going to go up the Grump meter, we're going to be upset, we're going to feel shame, embarrassment, fear, terror, worry, there's all those lists of words. We're going to feel those things, but it's not permanent. It's in the moment, and someone will be there, or me. I can talk myself down the Grump meter now. I know how to say, I need to get in my car and drive to McDonald's for a Diet Coke because right now I'm not good. And I don't, I want to take responsibility for that. And I need to take some deep breaths because my heart's pounding and I feel overwhelmed.
Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been so amazing. I think it's such a beautiful thing that you're doing. It's such a wonderful way of approaching such a big topic and a big issue, and making it simple. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think anything that you can teach to a child, you can teach to an adult.
Yes.
Where it's not like this simple concept and idea should be something that should be taught. Do you know what I mean? Like in business and interpersonal communication skills and all these other type of things, because there's plenty of people out there as adults that are living life and are stunted, completely emotionally disconnected in their lives. And something as simple as the Grump meter, I think, would change that immensely.
I do too. Thank you, Craig. It's been lovely.
If people want to reach out and connect with you and get more information or chat you up, what's the easiest way for them to do it?
The easiest way is my email. So it's nicole.obrien at slcschools.org. No H in Nicole, no apostrophe in O'Brien. Or you can just go to Rose Park Elementary's website and link to my email by that. I would love to chat with anybody. It's been fun because I've had about a half a dozen emails from across the country.
Really?
Of people I've been able to talk to and share more information with after the story aired. And that's exciting to me.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Share the love. Yep. Thanks so much.
Everybody go out and have a beautiful, wonderful day.
There you go.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and subscribing and supporting the podcast. Thank you to our sponsors, EntheoZen. Go check them out at entheozen.com. Go to Amazon and type in EntheoZen. Nutritional solutions for balancing the mind and body. Don't forget to enter the promo code ENERGYIS when checking out. It's going to save you 10% on any of your purchases.
If I have one message that I spend the rest of my life teaching kids is you don't need to be ashamed if you are sad or mad, and that hiding it just makes it worse, and that emotions are normal and natural. Your child or your children is the most important thing you will ever do. It takes courage to look at ourselves daily. It's not like a once in a lifetime thing. The ultimate probably goal of emotional self-awareness and regulation is for all of us to have empathy that others also are having experiences, and to try to get out of our own space at a certain point and say, what is someone else going through?